It started with a whisper, barely audible, just a single comment dropped in a room full of people, but it had the power to shake the very foundations of the monarchy. Late on a Thursday night, when Westminster was empty, the halls quiet except for the sound of a few stray footsteps, something was happening, something important but hidden. A sealed motion was filed under the innocuous title of Administrative Clarification, but anyone who glanced at it would feel the tension rising. This wasn't just some routine paperwork. No, it was the spark that would set everything on fire.
Is the apocalypse now? The difficult Duchess's worst nightmare has come true. Her response to her father's life or death drama.
Harry called Archie his African.
Behind that simple title was an inquiry that could change everything. It wasn't focused on Meghan Markle directly, but on her son, Archie. The moment it was triggered, the rumor mill began to spin wildly. It wasn't public, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even an accusation. It was quiet, but it was dangerous. The comment that started it all came from the notorious Tom Bower at a London event. He let the room fall silent with a single line, "The public has never been told the full truth about Archie's birth." He didn't shout, he didn't build up the tension, he just said it plainly, coolly, daring anyone to challenge him. When he added, "I'm prepared to defend that statement," the ripple effect was immediate. The world of British media started buzzing, the American outlets picked it up, and by midday, social media was ablaze. People demanded answers, others dismissed it.
So, William's very matter of fact, but let's...
No one knew exactly where this would lead, but the one thing that stayed constant was the mystery around Archie's birth. No accusations, no proof, just a quiet internal investigation set in motion by a carefully chosen sentence. And behind it all, the royal family was already scrambling to cover tracks, because in these matters, all it takes is concern. That's what landed on Prince William's desk the very next day.
Like becoming a new mum, and tell us a little bit about Baby Sussex, as we're calling it.
Thick, unmarked envelope, a simple note, "For the future of the monarchy, open personally." Inside was a dossier. Not a smear campaign, not an accusation, but an investigation. One that laid everything out in unsettling detail. It wasn't about a crime, it was about a series of inconsistencies. Timelines that didn't quite match up, statements from the palace that didn't align, hospital references that seemed to change depending on who you asked, phrasing that was carefully worded yet strangely vague. The dossier was methodical. Each section of it highlighted discrepancies. Nothing screamed lie, instead it quietly whispered something isn't right. The conclusion, a simple one: this does not align. And in the royal world, alignment is everything.
A strange new rumor began spreading, and unlike many of the others, this one seemed capable of growing legs. Could it be that, as many have come to suspect, Harry and Meghan are lying about...
Prince William's reaction to this document was instantaneous. He knew the implications. As he looked through the file, one section stopped him dead in his tracks. A witness account of a small, unspoken detail about Archie, something that had never been shared publicly. When William saw it, he knew. He had seen that very detail years ago, in a brief, quiet moment. That was when everything changed. This wasn't about gossip anymore. It was about documents, timelines, and a story that had been carefully controlled for years. And now the truth was coming for it. But Meghan Markle wasn't sitting quietly. She was already preparing for a fight. Her team was drafting defamation letters, organizing a response. But as the pressure mounted, Tom Bower's words kept echoing, "Discovery benefits truth."
Or just posting a lot more pictures. It has drawn a lot of attention to the controversies surrounding her kids.
And yet, it wasn't Bower's words that shook everyone, it was Harry's silence. For 48 hours, he didn't say a word. No defense, no public statement. The questions grew louder. What kind of father stays silent when everything is on the line? Was this a protective silence, or was it an admission of guilt? The world watched as Harry disappeared from the conversation, leaving Meghan to handle the fallout alone. Meanwhile, in London, the machinery of government was quietly shifting into action. The This wasn't a scandal, it was a constitutional crisis. No accusations, no finger pointing, just a quiet but official investigation into the legitimacy of Archie's birth. The monarchy had to audit itself. Back in California, the pressure was cracking Meghan. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages about the investigation, royal refusals to comment, legal opinions on succession. But the loudest noise of all came from Harry's silence. The tension mounted until, during a private conversation, Meghan allegedly made a slip-up. One word, one unfinished sentence that changed everything. The woman who gave birth, those words left hanging in the air, said more than 1,000 accusations ever could. And in that moment, it became clear. This wasn't just a question about Archie anymore. It was about the monarchy itself, about whether it could survive the truth that was slowly leaking out. A jet landed in the UK, and Harry stepped onto British soil like a man walking into judgment. No cameras, no crowds, just a private tense meeting with his brother William. The question that William asked was simple but cutting. Did she give birth to Archie? Harry froze. His voice cracked when he finally spoke, not for certain. The tension was unbearable as William slid the dossier across the table, its contents undeniable. Documents, timelines, legal opinions, all pointing to the same conclusion. If there had been any misrepresentation about Archie's birth, it could cost him his place in the line of succession. Prince William's words hit hard. This is bigger than Meghan, bigger than you, bigger than us. The political fallout would be monumental, and if this went public, the monarchy would never be the same again. Harry was left broken, staring at the consequences of years of secrecy. Meghan, on the other side of the world, was unraveling. The phone calls, the warnings, it all became too much. Her world, once perfectly constructed, was cracking under the pressure. And Harry's silence? It spoke volumes. It was no longer about a child. It was about what happens when a carefully controlled narrative finally unravels. It was about truth and what the cost of keeping it buried can be. And that, my friends, is where we are now. The monarchy is forever changed. Meghan's world, once built on perfection, is slowly crumbling. And the rest of us are left wondering, will we ever know the full truth about Archie's birth? The truth, as it often does, emerged slowly, piece by piece, like a puzzle being put together by unseen hands. The monarchy, once a pillar of unshakable control, now found itself shaken by the very thing it had always prided itself on maintaining: its image. The facade of perfection that had once shielded the royal family from scrutiny began to crack, and the world watched as those cracks grew wider. Harry, once the rebellious younger brother, now stood at a crossroads. The pressure of the years of secrecy, the lies, and the carefully curated story began to weigh heavily on him. The silence, once a shield, now felt more like an admission of guilt. He had spent so long hiding behind the walls of palace protocol, but now, with everything on the line, he could no longer stay hidden in the shadows. In California, Meghan Markle, always the image of confidence, began to show cracks in her own carefully constructed armor. Her legal team was working overtime, preparing to fight back against the mounting questions and scrutiny. The defamation letters, the media strategies, and the public statements were all part of a plan to regain control. But the problem was that control was slipping further and further from her grasp. She had always been the face of the couple's narrative, strong, poised, and determined to carve out a new path. But as the questions about Archie's birth grew louder, it became clear that her carefully controlled narrative was unraveling in real time. The legal threats, the media campaigns, none of it was working. The silence from Harry, the quiet rumblings of the royal family, and the growing uncertainty about the true nature of Archie's birth only intensified the public's fascination with the story. The royal machine, which had survived scandals far greater than this, was moving with its own rhythm. Insiders within the palace, including key members of the royal family, were determined to see this inquiry through no matter the consequences. There was no room for error, no room for public opinion to sway the course of what needed to be done. This was about the future of the monarchy, about its very survival, and it had to be handled with the utmost precision. As the investigation into Archie's birth continued behind closed doors, the whispers among the palace staff grew louder. Some believed that Meghan and Harry had crossed a line, that they had compromised the integrity of the monarchy for the sake of their own ambitions. Others, more sympathetic to the couple, felt that the system itself had pushed them into a corner, forcing them to create their own narrative in an attempt to protect themselves and their family. But one thing was was certain no one knew the full truth, and now they were all desperate to find out what it was. Meanwhile, in the UK, Parliament's quiet inquiry had reached a critical point. It was no longer just about one family's secrets, it had become a matter of constitutional importance. If the inconsistencies surrounding Archie's birth were proven to be more than just mistakes, if there had been deception or misrepresentation, the repercussions could be devastating. The monarchy, which had always been able to weather scandals, could find itself facing a legal and political crisis, the likes of which it had never seen before. As news of the inquiry spread, public interest exploded. Every detail, every new revelation was met with intense scrutiny. Tom Bauer, the journalist who had sparked the investigation, watched with a detached satisfaction as the story continued to unfold. He had said his piece, and now the truth was being exposed in ways he could never have imagined. He had never set out to destroy the royal family, but as the pieces fell into place, it became clear that the monarchy's carefully curated image was no match for the growing tide of questions. Back in California, the situation was equally tense. Meghan, once so determined to fight back against the media, now found herself facing the reality of a battle she couldn't win. The truth, no matter how inconvenient, was beginning to emerge, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Her world, built on the idea of control and perfection, was now crumbling around her. In a private conversation with Harry, Meghan reportedly asked, "What are we going to do?" The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. But Harry, for the first time in years, seemed calm. He wasn't the man who had once run away from responsibility. He wasn't the man who had hidden behind Meghan's power and influence. He was a man who had come to terms with the truth. A man who realized that in the end, it was the truth that would set them free if they were brave enough to face it. But as the royal family and Meghan and Harry continued to navigate this crisis, one thing became increasingly clear: the monarchy had already changed. It was no longer the same institution it had been before the scandal. The cracks that had begun to show in the facade were now permanent. The question was no longer whether the monarchy could survive this, it was whether it could rebuild itself in a way that the public could trust. For Harry, the decision was made. He had chosen the truth. No more lies, no more cover-ups. The world could judge him, could criticize him, but at least he would be free from the weight of deception that had burdened him for so long. For Meghan, the road ahead was less certain. She had built her empire on the idea of control, but now she was faced with the reality that some things could never be controlled. The truth, once revealed, would change everything. As for Archie, the child who had been at the center of this storm, his life would never be the same. He was no longer just the son of Meghan and Harry. He had become a symbol of everything the royal family had fought to protect and everything it had lost. His birth, once a simple moment of joy, had become the focal point of a global scandal. A scandal that, no matter how it was resolved, would forever change the future of the monarchy. The echoes of this story would linger for years to come. The monarchy, shaken to its core, would have to adapt to a new reality, one where the truth, once hidden, could no longer be ignored. And for Meghan and Harry, the future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they could never go back to the life they had once known. The truth had set them free, but at a price they never could have anticipated.